I would like to introduce to you Firas Ahmad Khalid, the medical doctor and PhD candidate in the Health Policy PhD program at McMaster University.
My name is Dr. Ahmed Firas Khalid, and I believe that effective leadership starts with a deep understanding of practical solutions to solving the world's most complex problems. This deep understanding comes from my knowledge about what our society needs today, and from my field experiences where I was immersed in communities learning how to best address complex problems with context-specific practical solutions. I started my journey as an ambitious 17-year-old who had an honest desire to change the world. And so I set out to be an intern at the World Health Organization's headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland. My journey thus far has taken me to more than 3 academic institutions, the privilege to travel the world in different capacities, and the truly humbling experience of immersing myself in local communities to understand better what it takes to improve the quality of life of people around me. When I look back at my time at McGill, I realized that we all were there hoping to make a difference somehow. And as cliche as that sounds, it was true. It didn't have to be on a global scale. Some of us were looking to make a difference in our own families, in our local community, in our academic institutions, in our departments, whether they worked at Ministry of Health. The truth is, we're all looking to make a difference somehow. There are 1.5 million Syrian refugees here in Lebanon. In Canada, we only took 50,000 Syrian refugees in total. Just to give you an idea what it is like, Hamilton's population is 500,000. There's 3 times that number here in Lebanon. For me here living in Canada, the Syrian refugee crisis is close to home. Because in Canada, we also took Syrian refugees. But it plays very differently from 2 parts of the world. My PhD work focuses on the role of research evidence in informing decision-making all around the world, specifically in low-middle-income countries. What I believe our society needs today is for engaged, effective leaders to step up. We need leaders who are willing to listen to what the problems people are saying they have, to really go out there and immerse themselves in local communities so that the solutions they're putting forward are grounded in what people actually need.
Thank you for inviting me tonight to be the keynote address speaker. It goes without saying, I'm really honored to be here tonight. I speak to you as somebody who spent the last 4 years of his life devoted to understanding better the biggest public health issue of our time, the Syrian refugee crisis. Raise your hand if you've ever traveled outside of your hometown and lived in a different city. Now think back at that time and raise your hand if after you moved, you felt this sense of loss, unsure of what you were doing. Same hands. Raise your hands if within the first few days of being there, you've wanted to just pack your bags and go home. Well, let me tell you something. You're one of the very few lucky ones, because that option is not available to many refugees and migrants. There's no home for them to go back to. What they know to be home at one point is not there anymore, or unsafe to go back to, so they're stuck in their new and current reality. Picture yourself being forced out of your home, away from everything you once held sacred in your life. Now imagine, after being forced to leave everything behind, you're now running on your feet, often in the dark, to any place that will offer you protection and shelter. For some, that means walking for days across dangerous lands. But for others, it means getting on a boat and crossing the turbulent seas in hope of making it to safe shores. Who among us can forget the haunting photo of Alan Kurdi, the 3-year-old Syrian boy who drowned on the 2nd of September 2015 in the Mediterranean Sea when his family was escaping Syria into Europe? This is not a scene from a Hollywood movie. This is the reality of more than 25 million people. As a man of science and a firm believer in the power of sound research evidence, I want the following figures to speak for themselves on the gravity of the situation today. Currently, there are around 68.5 million people worldwide that are displaced. Think about that for a second. that is almost double the population of Canada. I met Syrian refugees in Lebanon, and my time with them reaffirmed in me what I always knew all along. The right to safety is a basic human right. The right to health is a basic human right. This means providing quality and affordable health coverage, as well as social protection for all refugees and migrants, regardless of their legal status. I witnessed firsthand how the lack of access to basic health services can have detrimental effect on vulnerable populations. What I find truly humbling is the idea that refugees and migrants often arrive into our host communities with no physical luggage, yet they come loaded with their own set of beliefs, values, multiple languages, extraordinary skills, and rich traditions. We must take a moment and reflect about this beautiful tapestry of diverse people in our communities today. That reflection needs to translate into an understanding of the human capital we are gaining by welcoming migrants and refugees. Host communities like ourselves must gear more efforts on better integration of refugees and migrants. This does not mean that we ask of refugees and migrants to abandon their backgrounds in order to assimilate into our communities. But rather, we should be asking ourselves first, how can we benefit from this great resource we just obtained? As a Canadian Jordanian citizen, born in Jordan, but grew up in the United Arab Emirates, and lived in more than 9 countries around the world, I often get asked, where's home? Where do you belong? To be honest with you, I always struggled answering that question, and for the longest time, home for me was the city I was born in, the place where my parents lived. I recently lost my father, which challenged me to think critically on the meaning of home and belonging. Though my father is gone, his presence in our home in Jordan still makes me feel like I belong there. This reoccurring theme in my head on home and belonging resurfaced while visiting the Syrian refugee camps. I got to thinking at how children born in those camps will grow up one day and have to answer the exact same question. Where is home? Where do you belong? And the answer for some will be home is Zaatari camp in Jordan, the world's largest camp for Syrian refugees. Once I realized that, I changed my definition of what I perceived home and belonging to be. To me, home now is not a physical space. It is not tied to a land. Home is what I decided to be. It is the places we gather and the people we meet. Home is the memories we carry, the traditions and values we hold close to heart. Home and belonging are closely intertwined. Belonging is this idea of fitting into a community, and how much does that community welcomes us and includes us in making it our own home. It is more than just a feeling, it is a powerful catalyst for healthier communities. In a world that's continuously changing, with increasing immigration numbers that has brought diversity to our shores, I ask of you the following questions. What builds a sense of community and belonging? How can we adapt our systems to create a more inclusive community? How can we use technology creatively and effectively to create spaces where everyone belongs? So you're probably wondering, where do we go from here? How do we solve these questions? Well, the honest truth is that I don't have the answer. But what I do know for sure is that the refugee crisis must be tackled collectively and will require us not to only be thinking outside the box, but rather leave the box altogether and start fresh. Innovation in our approach is no longer a luxury, it is a must. What we need is creative minds like yourselves, pushing the boundaries where they've never been pushed before. We need the leaders among us to inspire us in figuring out how to come up with practical solutions to the world's most complex problems. I know that one day we will have to answer to the question asked of us by future generations. What did you do to help alleviate the refugee crisis? The burden falls on all of us to figure it out. There's no denying that to solve the refugee crisis, we must address the root cause of the problem. Remember, nobody chooses to be a refugee. My argument here today is that until we solve the root cause of the problem, we should remind ourselves that how we respond to the refugee crisis is a direct reflection of the values we hold today. This speaks to our Canadian core values of inclusion and fairness. We saw great examples of how Canadians have stepped up and lent a hand to the nearly 52,000 Syrian refugees we welcomed into Canada since 2015. But our work here is far from over, because all refugees in Canada still need our help. Life is expensive in Canada. The cold weather we all know way too well is brutal to many. Finding a job is difficult for most. I get asked often, how can I help? Well, let me tell you, the answer is simple. Start by educating yourselves about the people and their needs. Volunteer with an organization that works with newcomers in your area. Work with thrift stores, food banks, and charities. Donate your time, your effort, and your funds locally or internationally. I have not lost hope in our ability to be resilient in the face of challenging times ahead. What gives me hope today is knowing that leaders like yourselves are committed to finding solutions to our most complex problems. It is your drive to make a difference, your passion for finding sustainable solutions, and your willingness to disturb the norm in order to create innovative approaches. As you spend the next few days tackling some of the world's most difficult problems, I want you all to consider the following. Make sure that every solution you put forward is grounded in the community you are trying to serve. Remember that the simple answer is often the right answer. What we need today more than ever is practical solutions that are context-specific and that put the needs of the people first. I know that many of us here today feel cheated and angry, and that after so many years witnessing governments and leaders failing in addressing the world's problems. But we must not give up. We must challenge the status quo. We must see those failed attempts as stepping stones towards the right solution. The spotlight is on you now to inspire others to take on the challenge of solving intricate problems, to break barriers for change, and to lead us all into a brighter and hopeful future.